Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of CSXT Build Stuff. Today we're going to be doing kind of a more simple build. We're going to actually be doing these Athearn Genesis 2.0 AC4400s or AC44Cws if you're going to be technical about it here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. We're going to take our fuel tank off first here, as well as we're going to have to pull our couplers out here to start getting into this. So these are going to be kind of a more simple build in the fact that we're going to put Loksound in them. These are DCC ready, and we're going to do a really basic weathering job on them. We're not going to get too carried away because these units stayed pretty clean in the 90s. They weren't very beat up because they were still fairly new. So we're just going to take it easy here and do something a little more simple instead of this super involved model. These Athearn models are very nicely detailed, so it's kind of nice to do a project like this where really all we're doing is a little bit of wiring and some really simple weathering. So on top of doing our couplers and popping our fuel tank off, now you're seeing why we pulled our fuel tank off. We have these two screws that are kind of booger to get to unless you take the fuel tank off. So we're going to go ahead and pop those out. You see there we got one that you kind of got to work your way through the truck to get to. And always put the screws like that in a bag. And myself personally, I like to make a little label, so that way I know exactly what those screws were for and where they're supposed to go. So here you can see I put down body and frame, put that in a little baggie, throw that off the side so we don't lose them and we don't end up somewhere. As you can see there too, I take my McHenry couplers and I throw them all in a bag because I don't know what else to do with them, or throw them in the trash. Now the shell comes off nice and clean in one piece there. I do like how Athearn did these where all the everything's kind of in a contact pad in the shell there. As you can see, got a little over lubrication here from Athearn, so we went ahead and wiped that off with the Q-tip so I don't get fingerprints everywhere. What we're going to start off with here is some burnt umber acrylic paint. So this is going to be right here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to paint our wheels on this unit before we start doing any of our wiring or anything. Just because we're going to get this paint on here, and then while the paint's drying on the side faces of the wheel, we can go ahead and start undoing some of our wiring and stuff. So kind of try to work a little bit more efficiently here. Now with this model, since it's a fairly simple, not involved build, and I'm not really going to be ripping everything all the way apart, I'm going to go ahead and do something you guys don't see me do very often. I'm going to paint the wheels on the trucks, and the trucks are still in the frame. So what we're doing here is we're going to paint the exposed wheel face that we can see on our wheels, and then once we get a good coat of paint all the way around on both sides, we'll take and we'll use our finger to kind of move the flywheel. Since we have our locomotive part, see there we go, we can go ahead and turn our flywheel, and that'll give us our side that's not painted. Usually on a locomotive like this, or like a scale trains or something like that, where you gotta paint the wheels without taking it all the way apart like this, usually you have to do it in about 3 segments to get the entire wheel covered. You can only do like a third of it at a time just because of the way that the truck side frames cover up the wheel faces. So just gotta do it a little bit at a time. With something like this, to me it just makes more sense to just do them in there than try to take apart these trucks. On Atlas models, you guys have seen a bunch of times with the Atlas models, I'll just take the side frame right off the truck because it's fairly simple to do. With these Genesis models, I don't really want to start doing that because I don't know how they go together, and I don't want to break anything to where I can't put it back together. So you can see we have moved our flywheel again, and now we're painting the rest of our sides of our wheel there. So like I mentioned, it's about 3 generally is what I've found, so you do it in thirds. And just blast that paint on there. So we'll go ahead and we'll get that then, and we'll set that down. Now here's our decoder we're using. It's an ESU 58921. This is the board type decoder here, and I went with this because it has the little keep alives already built into it, and it's kind of the perfect deal to go with these Athearn models here, is to have that keep alive built in, because you basically pull out the factory board, put that right in its place. Here you can see we have our scale sound speakers. They are in the Athearn Genesis Uni 1. So that's the universal one speaker from them. Fits right in there, so that's where I go with on these. Now, first things first here on the wiring, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna peel this tape off. And I kind of like that tape, so I just kind of curl it up on the side there so I could hopefully reuse it during reassembly. And you can see I got more of this tape here in the back. We're gonna kind of try to put that off all the way there. It's gonna kind of fight with me a little, that's usual. But now the fun part, we gotta start going through all of our wiring here and figuring out what things are. So for this, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna start off, I'm pulling the little tabs off, and I'm gonna pull my truck wires off first. Just to kind of get an idea what's going on here and see what's where. I'm also going to pull off my rear light wiring there, as you guys see, I believe that is. We're going to pull that off and set it off to the side there. Now the nice thing is, like, the truck power wires, the motor power wires are going to be a little bit thicker gauge wire than any of the lighting wiring. So it kind of makes it easy to do this because you'll have like a black wire for your front light and you'll have a black wire for your truck. Well, your wire for your truck power is generally going to be thicker, so I don't really worry too much about noting what those are because it's kind of obvious, and you could also trace the truck wires. And then for the headlights, you could obviously also trace that up to the front here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start taking notes here so I know what color went where here on this DCC Ready board. So we have black is our rear light and front light, and walkway lights apparently as well. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start we got to peel more tape off. And we got to start going through all these auxiliary wires and figuring out what goes where. It's a lot of just pulling wires out and tracing them. Because like if they go to the contact pads, that can kind of tell you one thing if you look and you follow the wiring through there. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this little contact pad deal off here, just so I could look at the bottom and see exactly which pin some of these wires go to, and then I could go through and trace them on the shell as well if I need to. So it looks like our next one here is going to be our blue wire, which I didn't see what it said. But basically the big thing when you're doing this, guys, is just take notes. And when in doubt, like if you see, like the green wire goes to function 4 or the gold wire goes to function 5, just write that down. And then when you redo it, you can put them back in that order there. See, we have blue as function 4 and green as function 5. So I can't recall if those are ditch lights or what they are. We'll find that out later, I'm sure. But again, just when you take off the wires, write down where they went to. And then when you go to put it all back together, you could just put it back essentially the same way. So get all of these unhooked here. I believe those are our power wires there for a motor, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe they're not. No, those might be the walkway lights. I'll have to see. So we have black is also our walkways at function 6. So kind of, that's kind of the thing with this is all I'm doing is just taking it apart and writing down what goes where. I don't write down obviously truck wires or the power wires for the motor. And now that I got all that written down and take the part there, I'm going to go ahead and put that little contact pad board back in place just to try and keep the wiring from going everywhere. Try to keep it somewhat reasonably organized. It's a bit of a rat's nest mess, but we'll sort that out when we go ahead and start putting our new board in. So now I gotta get the board off of there. Get the last few wires that are still stuck in their offer board as well. And we'll go ahead and we'll take this 21 pin board and set it off the side, because we're not going to need that where we're going. We're going with a whole new board here, so go ahead and kind of set that in place and just see how it sits in there. Sometimes these, depending on the model, sometimes these boards don't like to sit perfect in there. But you see what happens. Now we got our speaker we're going to go ahead and get ready to put in. We got to pull our rear weight out here. Where Athearn from the factory on these DC models has this big giant weight right where the speaker goes. So we gotta go ahead and we got 2 screws to pull that apart, and then we gotta kind of wiggle the wiring up a little bit to get it out of the way and be able to slide our new speaker in there. Now sometimes these weights kind of stick. You guys can see I'm fiddling with that there. Gotta get the old chisel blade out and just kind of work underneath it a little bit and they'll pop free, but they're a very tight fit, so sometimes they do that. So now I'll go ahead and we're going to put our speaker in. And it's just a drop-in replacement. Shout out to Scale Sound Systems for all their really cool drop-in speakers. I mean, they have designed, I think they got a speaker for just about everything anymore. And they have drop-in style like this. And a lot of you that if you watch my other builds will start seeing more and more of, is I kind of have found a stock speaker size from them that I really like, that sounds great and works well with a lot of my builds, so I've been ordering those recently as well. So these, but for these, we're just doing a drop-in style. I couldn't recommend them enough. They always, pretty much for the most part, just go right in, and you can't beat that. You know, not having to fiddle around with building a speaker enclosure and all that. I'm kind of happy to not have to do that anymore. Done that for the last 4 or 5 years now, building enclosures for every single model I do out of the parts now. Here you can see, of course, you know, I'm trying to screw those in, fighting me a little bit, but that's the way she goes. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start sorting through our wiring and preparing to hook things back up to our board here. Now, whether you guys know it or not, I still use the old diagram there. That's why it's behind us. That way I can kind of keep track of things a little easier. And what we're going to start off by doing here is we're going to start putting some solder down on our board. We're going to start, so we're just going to start by attaching our truck wires. When I'm doing wiring, I like to kind of keep things simple as much as possible. And I like to start off with the basics. So we got to start off with getting power to our decoder board, which is from our truck wires. As you can see here, I kind of shorten them up a little bit, and then I take and I cut them. I get the soldering edge of the wire a little bit just to burn the insulation. That way I could get that insulation a little hot, burn it, and then I could strip the wire easier. If you try to use like wire strippers and all that, you run the risk of ripping the wire out of somewhere, and I don't want that. So I just carefully burn the end, make sure I get the insulation off, and then throw some fresh solder on it, put it to the board. That's the best way I found to do it. Some of your more professional wiring gurus might do, you know, fancy pants stuff here. But this is just what I do. I mean, I've been soldering things for almost 15 years now, not just in mile railroading, but in other things, and it seems to work all right. I don't have too many issues, so that's what I do. So next up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move down our board here, and we're going to go ahead and do our power wires for our motor. Similar process to the truck wires there on the rear. The only difference being is these motor wires I'm not going to shorten, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw a little solder on. Because from the factory, Athearn doesn't solder any of the wires to the board. They just use those plastic clips that you guys saw me removing earlier. And I'm really not a fan of those. I just don't like plastic clips holding my wiring together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solder these on because that's kind of what you have to do with these boards. So we're going to throw a little solder on our wire, and these wires are pretty close to barely reaching in the first place. So you got to kind of fiddle with them. As you can see, I'm kind of working them underneath the board there to try and get them to stretch far enough to make it. So that's what kind of makes this a bit of a challenge. Got a great shot of my finger there while I'm soldering something, because you know, the great camera angles I have sometimes. But so we got our two motor wires on, and now we're going to go ahead and we got to do our front truck wires as well. So now we got to dig through our rat's nest up here in the front to find those two. And again, it's kind of pretty easy. It's kind of easy to see here. That wire is very big for the truck power. And what you guys see me doing here is I'm pulling up in the front to see which wire is which for my power wires. That way I make sure I hook up my left side to my left side, my right side to my right side. So the easiest way to go about doing that is just to take and move the wire and see which side it comes from. So that's what we do there. And then of course we're trimming it down. We got to put a little solder down. We got to strip our wire, and then we'll go ahead and we'll put that in place on our board as well. Throw a little solder at that guy there. And we'll go ahead and we'll put it on our board here. And there you go, a little solder on there, boom, we got it. And there's the our other side truck wire right there. Kind of can see a little bit better in here. It doesn't look like it's that much bigger, but it's noticeably a difference with the wires when you're doing this. So, and again, trim it down, burn the insulation a little bit, pull that insulation off, throw a little bit more on there. Sometimes when you try to do this, that insulation will really fight with you and it won't want to come off, especially with some of the older Athearn Genesis models. I don't know what kind of insulation they used on the wires, but it was terrible to work with. But on these new ones, they're pretty solid. I was really impressed with these Genesis 2.0 models. They're very nice, very easy to work on, just overall a good deal. So now we have to go ahead and start off by doing our front light here. And that's what I currently believe I'm working on here. Go ahead and pull out that black wire there. We're going to trim it down. A little bit of solder. And just be very careful when working with these little wires because you can break them kind of easily, but at the same time, you got to make sure you get the end of that wire clean and get solder on there so you have a good connection to your board. And there you can see me soldering what appears to be my finger, but I'm actually soldering the wire to the front light in the board. The front light location on the ESU board, I should say. And now we're going to do the rear light. So I know it's going to seem like there's a whole rat's nest of wire in here, guys, but you just have to break this down. You start off with your truck wires first, your motor wires, and then start off doing your front light, your rear light, then do your ditch lights. You know what I mean? And if you work in an order and you just break it down into, doing the individual lights one at a time, it really makes doing this kind of wiring a lot more manageable. Because when you first look at the project like this and you've got, 30 little wires sitting in there, it's going to seem like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. There's too many wires, but just take it down and do it a little bit at a time, and it makes it a lot more manageable. So you can see we're doing our rear light now. And again, we're, just burning that wire in a little bit. Gotta get that solder on there. If I have one, I will say right now, if I had one gripe about these ESU boards, it's how small all the contact pads are. And then that's even a little bit of a gripe I have with the decoder buddies, is all these little contact pads they're making nowadays are so small, it's so hard to get the wire on there. I kind of hope we see that change a little bit in the future. And that is one thing I'll give that 21-pit Athearn board. It would be nice if they had the same kind of big solder traces for all that, for everything now, instead of having these little tiny ones. But we kind of got what we got, but hopefully in the future we can get away from that a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hook up our first auxiliary light here, which will be this gold, gray, green, I don't know what color that is. I guess it's kind of gold or greenish. And again, we're burning the end of our wire. And we're going to go ahead and, if I can ever get that thing to where I felt good about it, let's see. And we're going to throw a little solder at it, see if that'll get it good. Yeah, there we go. We're going to go ahead and we're going to hook that up. I believe that's going to auxiliary 1. So that would, not sure if that's a ditch light or what that ended up being, but if I remember correctly, guys, when I did this, I just went with whatever it was hooked up to on the original board. I hooked it back up to the same auxiliaries on the ESU board. And if I'm also not mistaken, on the ESU website, they have a sound file specifically for these Genesis 2.0 from Athearn models. So you should be able to just plug and play it if you want to just throw a 21-pin decoder in the factory board and all that. You should be able to actually just use that same file for this. Now, when I programmed mine and I did mine, I actually used the Scale Train sound file for their AC4400s-9s. And the reason I did that is because that's just kind of, I don't know why, I just like the Scale Trains. I just go with it. I think it was because I already had that sound file for something else, and I just went, I already got it, so I just used that instead of getting the specific Athearn one, because it doesn't really matter. It just might be a little bit different function mapping. But while I was babbling there, I hooked up a few more auxiliary wires, and now we're going to do our step light wires. And here you can see we have a whole bundle of wires that I need to solder down, so kind of holding them about where the length I want them. I put a little solder on that spot. And the main reason I do that is it just kind of helps burn all the insulation together. It helps keep that group of wires together so that I could come back and get the rest of the insulation off and prepare to hook those to the board there. So there you go. We're going to be getting some solder on the end there. And when you're doing a group of wires like this is probably the hardest part of doing any of this lighting wiring is when you have a grouping of wires like this, because it could be kind of hard to get all that insulation off. Just keep going at it and you'll be able to tell when you have it all off, because it's going to be it'll be a little bit hard to see, but you'll be able to see where it's much thinner. So now our last set of wires here, which is our red wires. We're going to have a bunch of red wires. And what the reds are, or what you'd call a common, essentially, I believe I'm not an electrical engineer or anything like that, or any electrical guru guy, but I just refer to them as a common, because the red wire, there's going to be a red wire coming from every LED, essentially, and you connect all those together, and you connect them all on these ESU boards. There's generally 2 pads for them, and with there being 2 pads, what I like to do is I take all the commons from the front set of LEDs, like everything, the step, front light, ditch lights, number boards, all the ones that are in the front half of the locomotive, I connect to the front one of the 2 contact pads on my board. And then I do the same with the rear. I take all the ones that are connected to the rear and I connect those to the rear contact pad on my board. And the reason I do this is if I have a problem when I go to test this, say I have a problem with a ditch light, well, then I have to check it makes it easy to know, okay, the front common set on my board will be where one of the ditch light wires is. And then obviously the other wire from the ditch light will be at its auxiliary part on the board. So it just makes it easier to diagnose if I have a problem. So that's kind of that's the way I do that. I mean, you could do it whatever way you want to. You could put them all to one, or you could, whatever you want to do. That's just what I do, because as long as you hook up all these reds from the LEDs together like this, you'll be fine. That is a nice thing, is that there generally shouldn't be any red auxiliary wires other than these common ones. So that kind of makes it a little simpler there. But now next we have to go ahead and hook up our speaker here. So we're going to need 2 speaker wires for that. And this there was, I don't know if this is the right answer here or not, but I'll just tell you guys like it is. There's like a plus and minus for the speaker, and there might be a plus and minus on the speaker. I couldn't tell you. I just hook them up. Generally what I do is like I kind of like, I start with like one end of the speaker, and that's the end of the board I go to, the closest, the closest, what am I looking for? The closest solder spot on the board for a speaker. So like right now we're doing this one here on the end, where we're going to put our wire to our very end here. So I'll go to the more end one on the board for it here. And then I'll do the one in front goes to the one closer to it. Is that right? I don't know. That's just what I do. So it works. As long as you're not trying to hook up both wires to one side of the board, or both wires from the board to one place on the speaker, it's going to work fine. So the hardest part of doing speaker wires is finding decent wire laying around that you cut off of something else that's usable. And here you can see we're just using some of the excess auxiliary wires or whatever have you from this model. I'm just going to use those for my speaker wires because they're already there and they'll get her done just fine. So go ahead and get those on there. Again, we gotta really make sure that insulation's trimmed good. And there you have it. There's that on there now. So we'll go ahead and like this. You guys just watch this, and this was like 10 or 15, just probably like 10 minutes of me just doing wiring. And to be honest, I want to say like actually doing this wiring work on this was probably about a half hour to 45 minutes. It's a pretty simple process. Like I mentioned, guys, it's just going through and breaking it down so that you're not getting overwhelmed by wires and just doing a little bit at a time. You can see we tucked that extra white wire back in place, back in there, because we didn't use that because it's not used for anything yet. It'd be a great way to add step lights if you wanted to your shell, but I didn't really feel like that on these. I wanted a little more of a simple project, and that's what we went with. So we put our tape back in place. Everything looks all good and tidy and neat. Again, shout out to Athearn for making these the way they did. They really were a nice, easy build when it comes to doing all that. Now, you gotta be very careful putting your body and motor, or your motor and drive back down your body there like that. Because that's the one thing that you can do to really goof something up, is you could catch a wire trying to put that shell back on, and that's a bad time. So take it easy doing that, you know, nice and carefully. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our screws back in our frame and body assembly here. So go ahead and, this is one of those things that, like, I know these manufacturers are doing this now to try and keep the body and frame nice and straight and good looking and all that. But boy, let me tell you, I really don't like trying to fiddle my way down in here with these screws in between these goofy places they keep doing this, like this right here. You know, here we go again, Steve. You're trying to get a screw into somewhere, a screw's not going to want to go. And I always just have these visions when I'm doing this and the screw starts doing a bit, like falling down into the shell, like in by where the tower gear and all that for the truck goes into the frame. Like, I just have a worry of it rolling down in there, and I gotta take it back off to get it out. Like, that's always a big worry. I mean, I'd say I'm not the biggest fan of like these designs like this. I wish they would move them a little bit closer to the fuel tank so you get in there, but what are you gonna do? And hey, there's your fuel tank. And of course, you guys saw my little trick there with the tape to hold our screw in place. So now we gotta go ahead and we gotta throw some couplers on here. I'm pretty big on the KD158s, the whisker coupler deal. I know some people like to use like the long shank and all that fancy pants stuff. I just use these 158s on everything. And I mean, literally, I use them for everything. I don't care if it's an auto parts box care. I don't care if the trip pin hits on the plow. It's going on there. That's what I do. I stick with what I know. So I just use those on everything, and I seem to have no trouble. Usually if like a trip pin's hitting on a plow or something, it doesn't really matter to me because I cut the trip pin off anyway. And most of the time, the plows aren't close enough to really touch and damage anything. So and that's just kind of what we go with here. Those KD158s, the whisker couplers. I really enjoy those. It's not a fun part. We got to try and fiddle this front one back in place here. And of course, this one's going to be a little bit of a pain in the rear here. The problem you run in with a lot of these prototypical looking models, these, you know, super detailed, perfected deals, is a lot of that coupler lift bar on the front, and it'll want to catch when you're going to put your coupler back in place. So you got to be really careful. A lot of times you got to do what I just kind of showed there. You couldn't see, but you got to lift that lift bar up to get it your coupler box back in there where it should be. So now that little thumbs up action. So you got to tape over your windows with some painter's tape, and then you head over to the workbench, paint booth there. You can see I got a little rail brown going on. So what I'm doing here is I'm just throwing a base coat of rail brown here on the bottom. We're not going to get too carried away here. We're just going to throw a little bit of this brown on here just to give it a little grit, a little use. But I'm not looking to weather the snot out of this. It's going to be a pretty simple one. As you guys kind of see as we're turning the airbrush around here, you can see all the places I got taped up, my number boards, my headlights, all my windows, etc. So just make sure you tape up all that stuff before you start doing this so you end up with paint in places you don't want. Next up, we have some weathered black, which I'm just coming in here on the top. And I just want to give that a little bit up here along the top here, just to kind of give it a little color, a little flavor. I want to give it that sooty look up there. Like, you know, this unit's been pulling a coal train for the last 5 years, and, you know, it's been working hard and doing a lot. So as you guys kind of see, I'm just kind of coming in kind of late with it. I'm trying not to just destroy it with that. We'll see me destroy it with paint here in a minute, but, you know, we're just coming in nice and light, get a little deal up there on the top. Yeah, see, it's not much, but it's there. And now we got our flat black, and this is where old Steve got a little carried away here with the old flat black on the top here. I was just trying to get a little bit of a really good soot stain here around the exhaust stack, and it just kind of got away from me a little bit and ended up being a lot more black than I wanted. But, you know, what are you gonna do? It still didn't turn out that bad. It's just kind of like it got a little bit much. That's kind of the trick. You see I throw a little bit down the side there like it was sitting there belching out the soot in one spot. But we went ahead and we're going to get that on there. See, there you go. A little carried away there. Next up, we have a panel line wash from MIG. And what I'm going to do here with this is You guys see I have some thinner there as well. Anytime you use one of these panel line washes, guys, make sure you use thinner, because this stuff is the panel line wash can be a bit much. So what I do is I take my brush and I dip it in the thinner, and then I dip it in the wash. That way I get more thinner than wash. That way it kind of mellows it down a little bit and it's not so extreme. And you guys are watching this at speed. I didn't speed this part up here. So again, in the thinner, in the wash, and then carefully on the side of the model. You gotta watch when you're doing like the side by the handrails and stuff, because the handrails will kind of take some of that wash and get a little carried away. And sometimes you gotta wipe off a little bit because you get a little heavy with it. What I'll do is I'll set my brush down on the paper towel, and that paper towel will pull a good bit of the wash out, and then I will go back over the model with my brush, and that'll pick up some of that excess if I get too much on there. So you gotta let that dry for a little while. And then next up we have our flat black paint here, because I, really read well on the screen there, but that's the way she goes when you're filming things. So we take our flat black paint, we put it down on a little piece of cardboard like you guys saw, and then I'm going to hand paint all of these grills. If there's any one step I would say is also, it's like painting the wheels. Come back and hand paint your grills on these. It is an absolute pain in the rear end. It's going to take you forever, but it's one of those things that if you take the time to do it, your model's really going to look nice when it's done. And it really just sets off the weathering. And the one other thing I'll also bring up here and kind of note is, if you guys watch very carefully here, you're probably going to watch me paint outside the lines and goof up a little bit, and you're going to say, oh man, Steve, that's horrible, that's terrible, that's why I don't do that. And you know what I'm going to tell you? Do it anyway. If you screw up a little bit, you screw up a little bit. It's no big deal. And it's one of those things where, like, you could make yourself crazy. I certainly have over the years trying to paint all these in, especially like these rear radiator sections. It'll make you crazy trying to get everything perfect and filling these squares in perfect. I just do the best I can, and normally they turn out pretty good. But if you do mess up a little bit, if it's a big run out of it, you get paint all over a door panel or something, you get a Q-tip, you wipe it off, and you move on. You touch up that spot again. So either way, the only way you can improve your skill at doing something like this is doing it more and more and more. So needless to say, here I am continuing to try and improve my skill set here, and continuing to try and get better at painting in these grills. These ones actually didn't look too bad. Although if you look at the second door I did there, you got the one and then the one over. You can't see in the top half right above the frame rail. You can't see where I got outside the line a little bit. So for any of you at home that have done this or done that, you can all say, hey, Steve does it too. So don't feel bad if you goof that up a little bit, because it's going to happen. It's pretty much a guarantee. See, look at that. Oh, way too much. And then you got to go in and wipe it off and come back in and start over again. It's always a struggle to try and paint those. I could get the smallest paintbrush in the world and I'll still get paint outside the lines. It's just kind of the way it goes with these. So that's, that's what we got there. These upper grills can be a bit of a pain too, because you have that little piece in between the two grills. Trying to keep paint off of that's a bit of a challenge. Hopefully we can succeed at that here. Hopefully, anyway. We'll see what happens. I hope I can. But that's really going to be about it with our weathering here for the most part. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw a little black paint down here for like some fuel spillage. Like, we're putting some paint in here. But other than that, we'll go ahead and we're going to clear coat this model. And that'll be about it. We'll clear coat it. So we'll go ahead and peel our tape off the windows, and we'll head over to layout and run it. We'll have to do a little programming over there to get things going. But as always, guys, I'm CR Steve. I want to thank you for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And I guess, guys, I'll see you in the next video.